Multicultural perspectives hold that culture is critical in shaping our understanding of abnormality, and culture can be defined as the values, beliefs, and practices of any ethnic or cultural group. Of course, our ideas about psychopathology always occur within a cultural context that shapes our judgments about what we consider normal or abnormal. From a multicultural perspective, mental disorders aren't cultural universals that are true across time and place. Instead, they're culture-bound syndromes that reflect shared cultural values. Let's think of an example. Multicultural theorists might see a diagnosis such as dependent personality disorder as reflecting Western culture's view that people should be autonomous and independent, and those who aren't are considered disordered. However, in a different cultural context, what we consider dependent behavior might not be judged abnormal. So from a multicultural perspective, dependent personality disorder isn't really a culture-free diagnosis. Instead, it's culturally tied to specific social norms and values. That is, it's a culture-bound diagnosis because its legitimacy as a diagnosis may not hold true in other cultures or historical periods. Of course, multicultural theorists differ to the degree in which they view psychopathology as culture-bound. So while some contend that all mental disorder diagnoses are entirely culture-bound, others strongly disagree, and instead see mental disorders as biologically and psychologically based, but as influenced in their course, development, and expression by cultural factors. So these latter theorists are extremely interested in cross-cultural data that looks at differences in the incidence and prevalence of disorders across countries and cultures. They also believe that the most effective ways to treat mental disorders may vary depending on the cultural context. Social justice perspectives build on multicultural perspectives. They view abnormality as the product of social inequality. So from a social justice viewpoint, people's mental distress shouldn't be mainly attributed to disorders that are inside of them. Instead, social justice perspectives attribute mental distress to social factors, things like inequality, racism, sexism, and other forms of oppression. So consider the following quote from UK psychologist Lynn McClelland, who comes from a strong social justice perspective. She says that structural features of society are seen as systematically marginalizing and disempowering some people and not others. And psychology itself is viewed as part of an ideological dimension which shapes how we think and feel about ourselves. Importantly, this includes what is regarded as acceptable or deviant behavior, such as what is seen as mental ill health. In fact, the very notion of psychological experience as indicative of a state of health is a pervasive and questionable assumption. So as you can tell, social justice perspectives, such as the one McClelland espouses, challenge the very idea of mental distress as reflecting a disorder within a person, and instead views it as an understandable byproduct of social oppression. So you may be experiencing mental distress, but from a social justice viewpoint, that's not because you're sick, it's because you're oppressed.